Hey everyone, it's Mecha. Welcome. I'm back on the History of the Emblem blog, and today we're going to look at the rankings of FE7 units according to Japanese players, and we're comparing them to how we usually rank FE7 units with this tier list that I made. So, last week we did this for the Sacred Stones. Check out the video if you haven't already. Our conclusion from last time is that the Japanese players emphasized endgame potential, while the English players tried to look at how our units perform throughout the entire game, which results in the English community giving higher ratings to units that start off well and then maybe get a little bit worse, while the Japanese community seems to prefer to look at the other units' performance after being trained. Now, this conclusion is not a foregone one because it assumes a lot of things. For one, it assumes that this compilation is representative of the whole Japanese community, which I don't know for sure. I have tried to verify it a bit, but most of the links of the sources that I checked at the bottom were just dead. I couldn't find anything. I also don't know how recent this blog is. I don't know why it's so difficult to check the date of a blog on Tumblr. As far as I know, the word blog is partially derived from the word log, which kind of implies that there should be a timestamp on your entry, like a date or a time, and there isn't on these. I do know that this blog has not been updated since 2020 at the very least, and I know it's at least as old as 2018 because I looked at the Wayback Machine. That's all I can find though. So, long story short, this might all be outdated. I have no way of knowing. If this is all accurate to what the Japanese community thinks, please let me know. If it's not, also please let me know. But at the very least, I think this is a fun insight into what they thought at one point in time, because it's very similar to what opinions looked like back when I was new to the English community. The English final community, of course. I just wanted that out of the way real quick. Now, let's get into things. So I'll read the intro. FE7 is a bit harder to judge compared to FE8, our previous unit ranking comparison, due to having 3 stories with different unit availabilities. Some players judged Lin mode units separately, while others combined it all into one score. Furthermore, most English tier lists judge with efficiency as the main factor, whereas most Japanese tier lists judge solely based on their own experiences. Since each player uses their own ranking skill, the bottom of the post has all the sources and skills they used. The ranking is the sum of individual scores compared to the combined maximum scores between all rankings. And the list is organized from highest ranked to lowest ranked. So unlike last time where we're just going from the start of the game to the finish of the game, we're going to start with the best units and work our way down through the list to the more depressing quote-unquote low-tier units. And instead of the rankings out of 5, we have their total here, and then their lettered rankings and the amount of stars they get, I guess. I guess there was one block that gave stars, and the rest of them gave letter rankings, just so you know. And I suppose that an S means that they ranked out of 6, basically. So, you know, S, A, B. I'm counting on my fingers right now, you can't see it. C, D, and E or F, I guess. So that's 6 possibilities. So that's a little interesting. Anyway, let's get into Hector. Everyone loves Hector. The only one who didn't give him a perfect score was Tanasu, 3rd score, though they didn't really have any particular reason for their less than perfect score. I should really emphasize that Tanasu and other names mentioned like this are not people, or rather they're not one person, they are a community or a website as far as I can tell. So if they're mentioning something like that, you know, they're not referring to like one person giving certain ratings, but it's a whole website and probably the average of that website. They criticized his low hit early game, but provided that he has good skill growth and mentioned his weakness to magic, but didn't really emphasize it. So, in short, everyone loves Hector. Now, if you look at an English tier list, you can see that Hector is ranked, well, pretty highly, like a B+, but not as near perfect as here. Like, he's nowhere near the best units. There's what, like 50 units ahead of him or something? That's quite a lot. It's probably because they probably factor in Eliwood mode a little bit more than this tier list that is just based on Hector heart mode. So Hector gets promoted a little bit earlier in that portion of time where you don't get to promote him, where he's capped at level 20 or just unable to become better, isn't really as big. And even on Hector hard mode, I suspect that the people who gave him a perfect rating would still rate him this highly on Hector mode, because the moment he hits level 20, they'll just stop using him for a bit. And if a unit isn't used, then you're not really being hurt by him as much as you're just kind of ignoring them for a bit. And so they only factor in the parts where they used Hector, which means the early game when he's still getting levels, and the early mid game where he's still good, and then late game when he is promoted. And so you just kind of ignore the part that is bad about him. I say bad, Hector's never awful, but there's definitely portions of the game where he feels suboptimal, like he's not really doubling anything. There's some chapters in Hector hard mode especially that are hostile to Hector, because there's more magical enemies there. Like I said, they factor in all stories a little bit, or at least the way they play the game. every person who plays FE7 is going to go through Lin mode into Eliwood mode first, and then even then you might have to go through Hector normal mode before you unlock Hector hard mode. Of course, for Japanese players, I do believe they could unlock Hector mode right away, or they could unlock more content right away by linking it with their FE6 cartridge, which is of course is a released game there. They could just do that, so maybe they didn't have to go through that like the English players did. But yeah, they can just enjoy Hector for all his glory, and that's why he gets a perfect ranking. I don't think this is justified if you take into account the whole game, but I get why they would arrive at this point, because Hector is one of those units that just, I think most people can agree at the very least, this is a very strong and stable and powerful unit that is very easy to not make mistakes with, or rather you don't really get punished for bad play unless you put him in range of a bunch of mages. Like, he's very durable. Defense is one of the best stats for newer players. I'm not saying all these people are bad players or anything, but it just means that the amount of people who are able to see Hector perform well is larger than just people who are very experienced at Fire Emblem. That's the friendliest way I can put this, and I think it's an accurate way. So that's Hector. Athos. Ranking 25 out of 27. So Athos is the most available unit in Hector hard mode and the least available unit in Hector hard mode. It got the highest score. A B, an S, an A, and another S rank. So, and 5 stars, of course, which I think is also the perfect score for the stars. So he's only missing 2 points from a perfect ranking. He's only around for the final chapter, and for a reason. He has overall great stats and S ranks for all schools of magic. For anyone who didn't train Canas, Athos can use dark magic in his stead. In fact, some reviewers recommend Luna over his personal tome, Forblaze. Very good idea, guys, very good idea. His only drawbacks are his low HP and speed, but his defensive stats make him formidable anyways. Yeah, the gap between Athos and the next best unit in the final chapter is absolutely massive, so I get this. If you're not factoring in availability, then Athos is the best unit in the game, probably. Like, if you don't care how many chapters a unit is, then a unit who's only in one chapter and has pretty much perfection against any enemy is just absolutely massive. The difference between the enemies in the final chapter and the enemies that you fight before that is just so big, and the way that they are tailored to make Luna work against them is so funny. Like, the total res in the final chapter must be like in the thousands or something. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean, right? It's insane. So I get this. We have Athos in C. It's very difficult to rank units with Athos, like Athos, when you count availability, because exactly how much credit do you give a unit for one chapter compared to a unit that's like good, but not like super good for a couple chapters. Like, you see the people who surround like Veda, Isadora, Rath, Farina, Louise. Like, these are units that are not available for a whole lot of time, and they're definitely worse than Athos when they're both around, or even like if you just took them in one chapter, they're definitely worse than Athos. But Athos is so good that how can you really make a comparison there, let alone compared to like a unit like Urk or Lucius, who we have a tier above. The Japanese players rank those units way lower, probably, or at least a little bit lower than Athos. But they're like, yeah, Athos is good. Like, there's no portion of the game where Athos is bad. It's only he's not around or he's really good. So you might as well just give him a really good rating. I wonder if this will reflect on, say, the other units that are just like good but not around a whole lot. Like, will they rank Jafar really low or really high? Because Jafar is pretty good when he's around, although not as good as Athos. What about, I don't know, there's not many other units like this in FE7. I guess Geats is pretty good. Pent, maybe? We'll see. Raven is 24 out of 27. They really like mercs in Japan. We had Garrick with the perfect score last time. Raven has 24 out of 27. 2 A's, a B, and an S. So that pretty much averages out to an all-around A, I would think. But it's also the 5-star rating, so that's why it's so high. Raven's overall... Oh, actually, I guess we can't really average them like that, because the S rank is based on a 6-point skill, whereas the others might be on a 5-point skill. Raven's overall strong stats land him in a very good position. Armodo, a website, gave him the lowest score because of his unreliable defenses. Other reviewers acknowledged them as well, but didn't see them as big enough detriments to significantly lower their scores for him. Again, totally get it. Raven feels very good to use. I thought there might be a mention here of something like Raven has low base level, and so he's under-leveled or something. But no, they just think he's very, very good. I do think Raven is not good enough to give a 24 out of 27. I think there's a lot of units I would put ahead of them in that case. Partial that is like no mounts, but even with no mounts, like, just leave the mount out of the equation, because clearly not everyone values a mount equally. That's fine. The lack of axes before promotion seems kind of bad to me. I don't know when they promote him. I wondered this last time when they got Garrick. I wonder if they would think Garrick is good to promote right away, or if they wait a little bit longer. With Raven, it's tempting to wait a little bit longer because he's already unpromoted by 5 levels, so you have to raise him up a little bit anyway. And I feel like they would just, you know, we're already investing in this unit, we might as well just go all the way and give him even more experience before we promote him. But even unpromoted Raven just one round just about everything. This is a unit that gets significantly better in Hector hard mode, because in normal mode his stats don't stand out as much compared to others, but he's still good enough to one round a lot of stuff, I believe. So I don't know, we put him at B+, below Fiora and above Hawkeye. I don't even know if I agree with this ranking anymore, but I still think Raven is fine enough to be like roughly in that tier. But, you know, solid kind of agreement there, honestly. I don't think I think they would be more like an A or an A+. I don't know why my tier list says A+. I think because I merged an A+ and an A- tier, and I forgot to change the text there. But A or B tier for Raven seems fair. It's not much of a difference there. The great thing about Raven, he's one of the few units who's good at base and in endgame, I guess. Farina, 24 out of 27 again, so definitely they don't care about availability or recruitment cost. 24 out of 27, an A, not any 5 points. I don't know what happened here. Another A and 4 stars. Despite being locked to Hector's route and requiring 20,000 gold to recruit, all the reviewers that acquired her, which Armodo didn't. Is Armodo a person then? That's weird. Agree that she has a good basis and better growth than her sisters, making her well worth the money. Notes acquired in the... Okay, maybe Armodo is a person. I don't know what happened here. That is very interesting. I just noticed this. Armodo didn't acquire a couple units in their playthrough, so they didn't get any scores. I gave them points in Armodo's stead based on everyone else's scores. Oh, so I guess they took like the average of other people's scores for Armodo's score. That's an interesting way of gathering data, but you know, we'll gloss over it. All the reviewers that acquired her agreed she has good basis and better growth than her sisters, making her well worth the money. Yeah, I don't personally factor in recruitment costs. I don't know why people do that, because like, in order to evaluate if someone is worth the cost to recruit, I think you first have to go over how good she would be if she was recruited, give her a rating based on that, and then as a player you get to decide whether that cost is worth recruiting her. But I guess they factor it into the final ranking. That's one way of doing things, I think. But, you know, whatever. I have her at C because of lack of availability, which I don't really care about. I do agree Farina has one of the best endgames of all Pegasus Knights in the series, honestly. Like, she's just so all-around good. The only stat that's kind of low about her is HP, really, and everything else is just solid, so I get where this comes from. It's kind of like the Tana rating, except Farina joins even later and is even more unleveled, but at the same time, she's in a position to like level up very easily if you don't care about turn count, so this is a totally understandable way of going about things. Oswin. Notice how the entries get very short here. I thought the FE8 ones were all like at least 4 lines on this monitor, basically, and here's like 2 lines. Oswin gets 23 out of 27, so significantly lower than Hector, even though I find them kind of similar, and Oswin has a better start. He has an A, another A, and B, and S, and 4 stars, so basically 3 A's, a B, and an S. Despite his relatively high level, his growth land him at a very respectable rank. Even his movement and luck aren't enough of a detriment to impact his score much. So they like the Armor Knights. I thought he would be higher. Most English player fans really like Oswin when he first joins, because he has really high defense, so he just tanks everything, which makes him very easy to use, just like with Hector. He two-shots just about everything. Because he said despite relatively high level, I'm assuming they don't really like the fact that he's over-leveled, and so he steals EXP, I guess. I remember when I first played FE7, like my very first time in the Fire Emblem franchise, I was playing FE7, I told a friend, like, hey, Oswin's good. He's like, yeah, he's good. He steals EXP a bit, though. Like, that's still kind of there. If you assume that pre-promote steal EXP, then I guess Oswin kind of looks like he's a mini Jacob or whatever, because he's level 9, but other units are like level 3 or something. So I get that. Nowadays, obviously, we don't care, but I get it. Oswin is just good all around. He's also like fast enough to double for FE7, especially when you're not playing in Hector hard mode. So, you know, I get it. I get it. He's really good. But I thought he'd be higher because he's just so noob-proof. He's such an easy solution to everything. I thought they would rank him like above Raven at the very least. Well, I guess not. Next up is Lyn in the Blazing Blade. Not the Binding Blade, in the Blazing Blade. I wonder if they'll mention how good Lyn is in the Binding Blade, though. Ranking 20 out of 27. So missing 5 points, 2 A's, 2 B's, and a 5-star rating. Most players praised her growths and strength, while her biggest criticism was her low defenses. Kuya was willing to waive off her defenses on account of her high avoid. Armodo, meanwhile, doesn't trust the RNG quite as much. Yeah, this is one of the points that I raised in my Lin analysis, is like, okay, so Lin is good avoid but bad defenses, so how good is high avoid really? Are you going to risk her dying to 2 brigands when you're using her because her avoid is good, or would you rather risk her, like, just fight 1 brigand and, you know, accept the fact that we can't find another one without risking her death? She's probably not going to die, but are you going to risk it every time? I think that is a good question to ask. Regardless, a really high rating. They praise her strength, which is also interesting. Sure, let's take Limb mode into account, right? Let's assume that she's trained to level 10 or whatever in Limb mode. Her strength really isn't that good. It's not nearly as good as, say, Raven's. It's a 4 base. Let's say it's about like 6 or 7 at the end of Limb mode after 9 level ups. That seems about fair. 2 or 3 times that it procs. I think that works out. Sure, you can give her an energy ring. I guess that's something that I did when I was new. I was like, give Lin all the stat boosters that you get, which is a robe and a ring. That's still like 9 strength at the end of all that. That doesn't seem very good. Let's keep that in mind. Lin's strength is good. I guess they do mostly look at the growth, and Lin's growth is like 40%, so that's about average. Like, I get it. New players like Lin. That's cool. That's understandable. But it's not because of her strength. Let's be real. Her strength is not good. What is good, though, is the Manikadi, which kind of compensates for that, where most sword-locked units are either forced to use an iron sword and have very low might, or use a steel sword and weigh themselves down. Lin doesn't have to make that choice. She can just use the Manikadi like 23-ish times before it breaks, because she always doubles. So in that sense, she's not hurt by low strength as much as someone like, I don't know, Guy. But at the same time, Guy has, as we'll see later, has more ways to get around his lower strength. Ninian and Nils are next here, whereas I have Nils in like S plus or S tier or whatever. They have them at 22 out of 27. 2 Bs, an A, an S, and then 4 stars. Dancer utility plus their high speed and luck growth, improving their survivability, gave them a good overall score. Again, how much do we use their avoid? Like, if they are going to get 1 shot, are you going to risk them like dodging and hit? If they're getting 2 shot, are we risking them dodging 1 out of 2? Note, while all reviews had separate entries for Ninian and Nils, most of their scores were the same since they're inheriting each other's stats and growths. Interesting. Armodo was the exception, giving Ninian a C when Nils had a B. However, since the reasoning stems from their personal dislike for her personality, I took Nils as B. Alright, fair enough. I do like it when they sometimes just take into account personality. I've always found it odd to see people rank characters based on both story, like personality, story relevance, and in-game prowess. Like, I get that is basically what unit feel is, and I totally understand discussing things like that, but when you're making something like a unit ranking or tier list, it seems more straightforward to leave one of them out of it. But again, I guess it is just people discussing their experiences. I'm just surprised to see it just like right out here. It's like, yeah, I just don't like Ninian's personality, so yeah, I'll give her a C. We'll give her a C. But I guess not everyone separates these as clinically as I do sometimes. I get it. It's part of the appeal of Fire Emblem is that your units are not just blobs of stats, but they have personalities, designs, story relevance, etc. Anyway, obviously I think the score is too low. Dancers are way too good in this game. No mention of the rings, like Ninian's Grace as extra utility. Ninian is just like such a massive help. And if they take into account Limb mode, then Nils also exists there, which seems to make this even better. It's funny that they have separate entries for these characters too. I just find that very cute for some reason. But yeah, I have them way higher. Despite the lack of availability, they're so good. Fiora, 21 out of 27. It's pretty good. It's pretty good for Fiora. 2 Bs, 2 As, and 4 out of 5. I have her B+, so that's about the same. Fiora's better skill and resistance and strength speed on par with Florina put her at a better spot than her sister, even if her luck is worse. Like her sister, her relatively low con is a bit of a problem. Yeah, I'd say there's a lot more problems with Fiora, but the advantages make up for it, like mobility, flexibility, etc. But I get how you'd arrive here. I don't know, you guys can't see it all the way down, but, you know, Florina's nowhere to be seen. I've always thought of Florina and Fiora as, like, very similar units. I have a tier difference between them right now. I don't know if I would still hold up to this day. I forgot if I used, like, Lin mode for this tier list or not. I'm assuming I did. And I do think that the difference is not that big between them. Like, their strength is within 1 point of each other when, assuming, like, Florina's roughly the same level as Fiora. It depends on how many levels you're willing to give her before Fiora joins, but their strength is so similar. It's not even real. And so are the other stats. Like, they're very, very similar. The difference is The biggest difference between the two is really Florina has access to Lin mode, which gives her access to more levels and maybe stat boosters. And then she has some availability and some things to do before Fiora even joins. And when they join, they're both kind of the same, except Florina can probably promote earlier because, you know, she's got more levels on her. And while Fiora has to wait a little bit. But you do have the whip from Pirate Ship that you have stolen. So whenever you want to, you can just promote Florina. Fiora needs like 3 levels and she promotes probably like Dragon's Gate or the chapter after that at the latest. Or you can hold off and train her a little bit more if you want until like Kinship Spawn. But you do really want to promote her before the Desert chapter, I find. And then the stats are just so similar. Like, yeah, Fiora has better res, but Florina's res is not bad enough to really care about. Like, if you give her Pure Water, she still takes 0 damage from a bunch of mages. The skill gap is not that big. Florina has not that much trouble hitting javelins. Plus, her level lead will give her, say, better skill, so she can maybe double with a javelin when Fiora cannot. Like, I see a lot of mentions. These are probably just mostly just their growth differences, honestly. Like, similarly with luck, Fiora's luck is not bad enough to get crit by anything except, like, maybe Kenneth Purge or something. Anything else is, like, whatever. The low con, it's also interesting they didn't mention that Florina's con is one lower than Fiora. It's just her speed is better, so it doesn't really matter that much. But yes, this does really hurt their offensive potential, obviously. I actually don't hate the ranking of 21 out of 27. I just think the reasoning is off. But we'd roughly end up with the same rating, so they can't even be mad. What I can be mad about, however, is the Canas entry. 21 out of 27, 2 Bs, 2 As, and a 4-star. The game's only playable Shaman receives a respectable score. Basically, he's good because he can use Luna, and having good growth never hurts. Spent a whole video long time ago talking about why all these things, like the only playable Shaman, he's good because he can use Luna, why they don't matter as much as a lot of people think, but obviously they still factor into things. But there's way more to Canas than this. I'll just say waifu Canas and be done with this. Basically, going to be the fourth of this rank where I've ranted about this like way too much, or Amelia, whatever. I'm okay with the rankings. I think he's a little bit better than this, but obviously I'm biased because I like Canas a lot. God, he is good, but God, do people overrate Luna? Like, oh, what enemy are you using Luna against except the final chapter enemies? Like, come on. Come on, bro. Come on, dude. Wrath. 21 out of 27. A B, an S, 2 more Bs, and a 4-star. Being on a horse nets Rath some more points than his foot archer counterparts, though some reviewers were concerned by the Nomad's newfound weakness to horse-slaying weapons that, for some reason, they didn't have in FE6. Bro, that was a bug. Why are you complaining about them fixing a bug? His late recruitment time in the main story, plus his low number of supports and all with infantry, also docked some points with some reviewers. However, his overall good stats kept his score high. Actually, I don't know if that is a bug. I forgot if Rapier is effective against, say, Horseman from early game, like the early NES Marth games, because I do vaguely remember that the translation kind of made it seem off. But either way, we know Rapier and Horse Slayer are not effective against Nomads in FE6. That's why Chapter 4 is kind of annoying sometimes in FE6. But it's funny that they find that annoying because, like, how many Horse Slayers are really existing in FE7? It's maybe 1 enemy per map, and most maps don't have any. Like, you're the person with the most horse slaying weapons on your team, probably, with the Wolf Beal and the Rapier. The enemies barely bring any. Plus, like, come on, is the movement worth it? Like, is this really worth spending this much time talking about? I guess it's like, and this is just a summary, of course, but the fact that most of this entry is about the horse slaying weapons, this is so funny to me. But I totally get this, like his late recruitment time being a bit annoying, he being on a level, because you can't really train Rath a whole lot in limb mode. He just doesn't gain as much XP as you would want to. And yeah, no supports. Sure, I don't really care about supports, but if they do, then I get why they would dock points, because he literally only has 3 supports that advance at a pretty slow rate too. But yeah, Rath has very good all-around stats. He has really high HP, strength, speed, and skill. Like, just pretty good stat spread all around, especially if you just look at growth and not so much as bases. So I get this. Like, it's a pretty respectable score. We have him at, you know, C because he does have to catch up. But the way that we use him for efficiency playthroughs is generally he's almost like a pre-promote, where he just needs like 3 levels to get there. And then he's pretty solid. He has a lot of things that he can do that few other units can. And so the only reason he's that low is because that portion where he can really help you go faster is pretty small, since most of the chapters after he joins are turn forward. And in addition, there aren't that many of them that aren't turn forward. And so what is he, how much turns are you really saving with Rath, right? Like, how much is he really helping you? There's a couple chapters where he is really helping. Like, if you look at Dundon's 0% growth run, for example, Rath is deployed almost every chapter until the final. He's pretty nice. But, you know, lack of availability kind of hurts there. Lucius, 20 out of 27. Very similar unit to Arthur from Pegasus, who they gave like near perfect scores. He has a B, 2 A's, a C, and a 4-star. While Lucius is praised as a good player phase unit, his low luck and defense detracts from most of his scores. You know, fair enough. It reads like they're very mixed on him. This very short summary, it reads like it should be like a 5 or 6 out of 10. But I get that not everything is equal. They do like their glass cannons apparently, because 20 out of 27 is like still a very passing grade. Like one person gave him a C, that's the lowest it got. Everything else is above average or way above average. Probably roughly in line with the B- that we gave him, so not much of a difference there. Eliwood, 19 out of 27, a C, 3 B's, and a 5-star. That is a stark difference, a C and a 5-star. His biggest criticisms are not having any particular outstanding stat like Hector does, as well as the fact that Randall weighs him down too much. Nearly all the reviewers said he is useless for the final battle if he's using Durandal. Night Lord's weaknesses to horse-slaying weapons as well as mediocre stat caps also did not go unnoticed. Kuya touted Rapier's improved stats from FE6, plus Eliwood's greater movement and ability to use lances after motion, to ranking him abnormally high compared to the other rankings. For sure. This last part is very interesting to me. The comparisons to FE6. English fans don't have this. They have, when they first play FE7 as like the first Fire Emblem game, rarely have they even touched FE6. All they know about FE6 is, well, Roy, and they don't even know that Roy's from that game most of the time. This is no Roy's from Smash. So them going, oh, they improved Rapier from FE6, that's a good thing. It doesn't even matter like if Rapier was complete dog shit in FE6 and then maybe it's made slightly better in FE7. They just like that it's improved. I find it very enjoyable. You'll see a couple more FE6 references in these reviews, and I think that's the most interesting part of these reviews. Other than that, not having a particularly outstanding stat like Hector does, I totally get why this would impact them, but I think it should really depend on the context, how much this really should hurt his ranking. Because what if all of his stats are just good enough? Like, what if his speed is just enough to double? What if his strength is just good enough to 2-hit KO? What if his bulk is good enough to survive almost anything in the game? So what if he's balanced? What if he's just good? But I get where they're coming from, because it makes it so that if he misses a benchmark, it feels a lot worse if he's like just short of doubling or just short of killing, or just not durable to survive an enemy phase. Then this gets annoying. And with Hector, at least you know his defense is going to be really good, and so he can at least tank everything, and his strength is good enough to usually just two-shot anything unless you get really unlucky. Whereas with Eliwood, it doesn't take as much to get unlucky. So I get why they have this feeling. I don't think it holds up statistically most of the time, but I get the feeling of it. This obviously doesn't matter for his rating. Like, if he's that bad with Durandal, just don't use Durandal. It's just one chapter, like who cares? But again, endgame performance is very important to them. I guess they also might be comparing it to the Durandal from FE6, which is obviously way better. Weakness to horse-laying weapons, again, I don't know why that matters at all. Maybe it matters that Eliwood promotes so late. Maybe that should be brought up here. But yeah, I don't really agree with the way he got here. I do think Eliwood is like, as an above average unit, I can see it. I personally put him very low because I don't think he's worth the training compared to units that are just good at base. Like, there's so many units that are just so strong with little work that Eliwood is not really worth training if you're trying to be efficient. But again, they don't care about that, and so they rank Eliwood a little bit higher than I did. I agree with the drawbacks that he has and the lack of benchmarks that he sometimes hits, but in a different manner. Florina, 19 out of 27. The general consensus is that she starts off weak, but has good growth and is worth training. Her low con also gets some criticism, although it does not hamper her score much, which you can see here because she got 4 Bs and a 4-star, so pretty much all around Bs. 19 out of 27, and compared to us, we put her at like A tier, like the highest unit that is not Marcus or Nils, which I don't know if I still agree with that. It's a pretty old tier list that I made here. Florina's fine, but she does have her issues, does require investment. It's just that investment is totally worth it, and you know, they kind of agree with that. So we're not too far apart here. Lots of scores where we just kind of agree. Priscilla, same rating as Florina, except she has A, C, and 2 Bs and a 4-star. Her low HP and defense dock her some points, though being on a horse gains some of those points back for some players. Her decent skill, speed, and luck also make her chlorine light for some viewers. And I guess, yeah, she has a similar stat line if you just look at her growth, and even her bases are fairly similar. And, you know, mounted healer is always good. I don't think there's anyone who thinks Priscilla is bad. Some people might not, like the fact that she has low durability, but overall, I can't really disagree with any of these conclusions. The summary here is, of course, like a very short version of what a bunch of people have said. So I don't know what else they have said. And again, we have an FE6 comparison. Clarine Light. They don't care about Priscilla as a unit in a vacuum. They want to compare her to what Clarine does. And I feel like Clarine is a bit more lopsided, more of a dodge tank after promotion with her supports and everything. Whereas Priscilla feels more like just a heal utility bot. But that might also be because she's Wind Affinity and doesn't have the Rutger support like Clarine does. Pent, also 19 out of 27. 2 Bs, a C, an A, and a 4-star. To put it in Armodo's words, a master who can have better stats than his apprentice. This is a violation of Fire Emblem rules. I think this says a lot about expectations from units. Like, if you give someone a Pent, they're gonna think there's like a drawback to it. Like, they can't just give me this, right? This seems way too good. I should only get something that's good if I work hard to get it. You know what I mean? Whereas if you give him Nino, they're like, oh, she looks awful. There must be a big reward at the end if I try to train her up. Which is the way that I look at people in like most RPGs, like most turn-based things. Like if I just get something that crushes everything, I'm like, oh, they're gonna leave my party, aren't they? They're gonna betray me, aren't they? They're gonna leave me or something, right? I totally get this. I mean, but the fun thing about FE7 in particular, and a lot of other Fire Emblem games, is they do just give you that for free, and you can keep it for the entire game. In spite of that, they gave Pent a C. I think they were feeling pity about Pent stealing their XP. This reads like an interpretation from the blogger. I don't know if this is a translation or just a funny quip they were making. But yeah, Pent is obviously that good. The main drawbacks for Pent are things like he's not around enough, he doesn't fly, he doesn't have a mount. I don't know, that's it. He's just really, really, really strong with no drawbacks whatsoever. So I feel like they could put him higher. Like if they didn't care about Athos' availability, then why isn't Pent like a perfect score too? Is there a chapter where Pent is bad? Like at all? I don't think so. Like why does Pent not have a perfect score? Maybe they don't like his low growths. Maybe they don't like that part. Legault, 18 out of 27, 2 Cs, an A and a B, and 4 stars. Thief utility. Legault's usefulness depends on how good Matthew has turned out. The general consensus is that he's a good candidate for assassin due to his high speed and luck growth. So they're thinking, okay, if I'm going to have an assassin, if I'm going to have a combat thief, I might as well use the one that has better speed and luck. I don't know if Legault's speed and luck are really that much better than Matthew's to the point where that matters a whole lot. I also think there's more stats that matter than just those two. But Legault's stats are not that different from Matthew's, especially outside of Hector hard mode, so I'm not even going to gripe on them a whole lot. Rating seems okay. Legault has to be like the most unit to rate in all of Fire Emblem because he's just a thief with kind of combat. Pretty cool, but don't really like, it's just a stat. The stats barely matter. He's just a lockpick bot for most of the game. There's barely anything to steal. Harken, 18 out of 27, a C. Looks like, again, this person, website, didn't recruit Harken. Maybe they got Karel instead, I guess. A B, an A, and a 3-star, so pretty much in the middle for all of it, really. Which, again, I got a question. When you're rating Athos as a perfect score, why can't you not rate Harken this high? Like, remember, Raven was a 25 out of 27. While he is no Raven, he has serviceable stats and growths, plus he joins with a Brave Sword. That's pretty cool. Maybe this is partially because they don't play Hector hard mode all the time, whereas this tier list kind of pretends that it does. Maybe he looks a bit worse compared to Raven. But then again, Raven has Hector hard mode bonuses too, so that can't be it. Why did they hate? It's got to be the low growth again, right? Serviceable? I mean, he kills everything. What more do you want from this unit? What is he supposed to do? He's so good. Why is he only a 3 out of... Like, the only reason I can think of them for to give him a 3-point rating is growths, because they don't care about availability. If they did, the scores would be very different. So I'm trying to figure out why they hate Harken. What has this man ever done to deserve a 6? Like, if you give a perfect presentation to your teacher, they're like clapping. They're like, oh, this is great. You did fantastic. You did what you were supposed to do. You get a 6. You'd be pretty upset, right? That's what I'm feeling for my boy Harken right now. Why is he only getting this rating? Rebecca, 17 out of 27, lower than Harken at the very least. If you cannot tell, Armodo has a thing for horseback units, which is why she gets a single measly point from them when everyone else is giving her 4 points. So Armodo, on their own, is holding back Rebecca from what I'm guessing is like a 20 plus score. And after the Amy rating, I can't even be that surprised, because yeah, it would pretty much just be a B all around, which as far as I can tell, yeah, that would be like a... Maybe not Canas, what's like an all-around B, like Eliwood, slightly higher than Eliwood, I guess, which I wouldn't even be mad about that one. But yeah, they like Archer Girl. They just really like Archer Girl. And again, Rebecca, Fire Affinity, give her support with Lowen or Dart, or what else she support with? Will, I guess. And her offense looks pretty good. She dodges everything. That's all good and fun. And she's around for the whole game. So in that sense, if you care about availability all of a sudden, then that matters, I guess. I know why people like Rebecca. You guys know why I don't like Rebecca. You know, Archer, no counterattacks, bad bases, like really bad bases. Yeah, she has some issues, but the issues are such that they don't care about it enough to give her like a very bad rating. And to be fair, it's only a B. They didn't give her an A like Naomi. Nino, same rating as Rebecca, joins like infinitely later, but with a much better class. And this is what you end up with: 3 C's and an A. So a very different composition of ratings here, and then a 4-star, so like a B. She makes for a great mate once you train her up. The issue just happens to be training her up. Yeah, couldn't agree more. I just agree that, or I just think that it requires, you know, to put her a little bit lower, like at the second worst unit in the game. But they're saying, oh, she's passable when you train her up. She's great. She has good growths. And, you know, what else is there to it? Yeah, you have to train her, but it's not that hard, right? That's interesting. I'm really, like, this has to be like a 2012 GameFAQs kind of rating. This is really what makes me think this is a very old website or a very old compilation. Sane, 16 out of 27. So we have, keep in mind from here on out, that every unit we rate from here on out is going to be lower than Nino, Rebecca, Legault, and Lynn. Those are the main defenders I think that are too high here. Every unit that we see from here on out is lower than all those units. Sane, 16 out of 27, C, B, and 2 C's more, and then a 4-star. Hope you guys can't hear that car alarm. His strength growth is praised, but his low skill and mediocre defenses lower his score with most players. Several of them said if you use him, you need to use Kent with him for their support boosts. You know what? I don't even mind the score too much. I don't think these are big issues with Sane, but they definitely hold him back every now and then. So this is not a terrible description of Sane. I just think the ratings are a little bit too low because the Paladin class is just that good. And his stats are good enough to get by most of the time, where these are not significant drawbacks for him. Like, if you think his mediocre defense is like bad, then, you know, look at Nino's defense. Like, Nino will never have more bulk than Sane. Nino is given a higher rating most of the time. So I don't know what happened there. Like, why would you give Nino an A and Sane a C? That's all I'm saying. Or if you care about Sane's mediocre defenses, then, you know, should we maybe penalize Lynn for that? Maybe? Or, you know, Lucius? Kent. He would have gotten the same score as Sane if it weren't for SRPG 824's different scores for them. SRPG's reason for giving him a lower score than Sane is his bad luck and only just balanced growth. A couple people pointed out his bad luck as well. Kent's luck is like, I looked this up the other day, it's like 1 point lower than Sane at base, and it grows into a gap of like 2 or 3 luck over the course of the game. And that sounds like it can matter at some points. Like, sure, if an enemy has crit on Kent and not on Sane, that can be significant. But keep in mind, the Tactician bonus that is in FE7 also lowers crit rate by a whole lot, to the point where I don't think Kent faces crit a whole lot, unless it's like a very specific enemy type. Like, maybe a Merc can crit Kent sometimes, where they cannot crit Sane. That can happen sometimes, but how much damage is a Merc gonna do to them when they just use a Lance, right? And that's like a very specific scenario that really doesn't matter all that much, to the point where you give like an entirely different rating. I don't know what happened there. And to be fair, this is only like, they only end up like 1 point apart in the rating. This is me splitting hairs, but it just annoys me when I read stuff like that. What else was there about Sane? I mean, Lin mode, but they don't really talk about that explicitly. I do agree that supporting them together is pretty fun, although it sucks that they both need a Night Crest. Oh, the thing about the Tactician bonus, I should mention here that maybe the Japanese version works a bit differently, because I know you can pick their blood, you can pick your blood type there, rather than your affinity, I think. It's kind of weird. I should play Japanese FE7 one of these days. It seems pretty interesting. But that might matter. Also, I should probably mention this. I forgot this before, but the horse slaying weakness, they might also care more about that, because effective weapons have triple might instead of double might in FE7, except for like the Durandal and stuff for some reason, like the dragon slaying ones. But most weapons have triple effectiveness. And so that might be why they care a little bit more about horse slaying weakness. I still think it's insignificant in the grand scheme of things because of how rare the weapons are, but, you know, at least they're not just silver weapons only against horse weapons, you know what I mean? Will. Obligatory will is so bad here. 15 out of 27. 2 C's, a D, a B, and then a 4-star. SRPG and Kuya, his 2 highest scores, acknowledged him as a solid choice for a balanced archer. So when it's Eliwood, it's bad, but when it's Will, it's good. Kuya also mentioned his ability to support with good units like Raven and Rath. These supports are very, very slow, by the way. This has to be like I think this is like a 1+1 support where it takes like 80 turns to get a C. Meanwhile, Armodo gave him a low score of a D for not being a particularly outstanding unit. Armodo is the MVP right here. Armodo understands Archer's bad. I'm pretty sure Armodo is also the one that gave Rebecca the D. Yeah, there we go. You know, innuendo not intended. Sarah, 15 out of 27. We have a C, a D, 2 Bs, and a 3 star, so roughly around a C+. Opinions on Sarah were mixed. Her higher scores praised her relatively good growth and higher magic growth than Priscilla, and found Sarah easier to use even without Priscilla's higher movement. Understandable, because Lin mode exists, and yeah, her growth are a little bit better. Her base magic is awful though. On the other hand, her detractors cite Priscilla's higher move, Sarah's low might magic rank upon promotion, and the uselessness of S-ranking staves, which, I mean, Priscilla has the same problem, right? Doesn't that matter all of a sudden? Like, doesn't that detract from Priscilla as well? Or is this about Sarah's overall ranking then? I don't really care about her low light magic rank, because I don't really plan on using anything heavier than Shine anyway. Like, that's enough to use everything you want to use, right? I guess they don't really care. But I guess they want to get her to Aureola rank or something. I don't know what they're trying to go for here. Staves are just really useful. I think 15 out of 27 is probably like kind of justified for Sarah. We have her in C tier too. Like, we don't have her that high. I think she's okay. You can never, like, Sarah can never be found bad or anything. Like, the healing is always appreciated, and the status staff curing is always appreciated in Hector hard mode once you get to that point in the game where that's very common. So Sarah's fine, I think. I don't hate this rating too much though. Heath. That's a super low score for one of the better units in the game. And then a super short justification for it. 15 out of 27, a C, another C, and then a B and a 4 star, which are basically 2 more Bs, and then a D. So what's so bad about Heath, man? Most of the reviews saw him as a solid unit if you were not already training Florina or Fiora. So what if you use both? How about you use all the good flyers? Or, you know, we just ignore the other flyers for a minute and just look at Heath and how good he is. And there was a period of time where I thought Heath was very bad. And the reasoning was that I found that there's just too many enemy types that Heath theoretically has a disadvantage against, which is axe users, bow users, and magic users, which together, that's like half the enemies there, right there, right? Like, if he's bad against archers because he's weak to them, axe users because his weapon triangle disadvantage, and magic users because of his low resistance, then he's only really good against sword users and maybe like auto lance users. Maybe that sounds like a pretty limited useful unit. But then it turns out you can manipulate things with like pure waters and axe reverse, and Heath's flexibility just kind of makes up for these problems, and his like HP and defense and strength are all just good, and his speed is good enough to double sometimes. Heath is just a good solid unit that's a little bit under level. Like, okay, so I get that Heath is not good off the bat, but they clearly don't care about this. I also know he's not available always, but you know, they clearly don't care about that. If you're gonna give Nino, and I'm gonna keep bringing this up too, if you're gonna give Nino, wherever the hell she is, if you're gonna give Nino a 17 out of 27, if you're gonna give her an A, why are you gonna give my poor boy Heath a C? Like, which of these units is better, do you think? That's what I think. It's just my opinion. I have him an A+. I don't really care about where exactly he goes, but I do think he's one of the better units in the game, despite his underleveled units, despite his low res, despite his somewhat questionable bases, especially speed-wise. But he snowballs pretty fast. He's pretty solid. Even if he's not doubling things, he can be useful in some way to you. He's just a he's very good. Even if you're already using some flyers, you know, one of them can be your carry that destroys everything, and one of them can be more utility based. You can swap them around. Sometimes Florina and Fiora are better because there's more magic around. Sometimes Heath is better because there's more physical enemies around. So training both has some pretty big advantages. But yeah, I don't know. It's very weird how they go back and forth between giving high ratings to underleveled units and giving low ratings to them. That really, it doesn't really annoy me. I don't really care about this stuff. I just think it's fascinating. But it also kind of, you know, it kind of itches me, you know what I mean? Jafar, 15 out of 27, 3 C's, a B, and a 3 star. So basically a bunch of C's. He has a good basis, but poor growth. An acceptable assassin if you didn't train Legault or don't want to promote him. Best used with Nino, of course. Yeah, goes best with that unit. I guess the support's there, is what they're referring to. Because I don't think Jafar is a great way to train Nino. Like, what if you just crit someone that you were going to kill with Nino, right? They really care about the fact that the assassin cannot steal, as you'll find with Matthew later. That's why they mentioned, like, if you don't want to promote Legault. I don't think they're referring to the fact that the fail contract is expensive or anything like that. They care about class by class things. Like, they want to have maybe one assassin. They don't want to have two. So if you want to fill that assassin slot on your team and you didn't get trained Legault, then you can use Jafar, I guess. Again, I prefer to look at characters more in a vacuum, or more in, like, how good are they, and if, you know, he's good and Legault is good as well, then we just use both. But I get where this approach is coming from. Poor growth, like, whatever. He grows so slowly, you barely even care. Like, he's level 14 promoted. But yes, his growths are very bad, so it's not an investment, but he's someone that's already been invested in off-screen, is the way I like to think about it, and now you get to reap the rewards for free. That's how you should look at pre-promotes, I think. Still, this is, like, don't get me wrong, it's not a low score. It's still a passing grade. It's still over the 13.5 it would take to be exactly halfway through in 27. So, I don't know what it takes to have a good score around here. But at least he's worse than Harken, right? That's consistent. Lowen is lower than everything above here. Again, lower than Lyn, lower than Nino, lower than the other Cavs, which I get. Very strange. Lowen gets a thoroughly average score. The reviewers commented on his unusually good defensive growths, but his attack skill and speed left something to be desired. These are actually fair criticisms of Lowen. I don't think it results in the score that they give him, but this is totally the experience you get with Lowen, a unit that sometimes fails the double, or fails the two-shot, or sometimes even has trouble hitting. His bases are pretty good for his level, but at some point the growth do catch up to him a bit. 30% all around is like a bad feel kind of growth. So I get where they're coming from with this description. I just don't agree that it results in, like, C's all around. But, you know, I get it. If they like Rebecca this much, though, they should give him credit for supporting Rebecca. Like, I've seen credit for, like, Jafar supporting Nino. I've seen credit for Will supporting Rath. I've seen Rath docked points for having 3 supports, and then Will gained points for supporting Rath. So we should praise Lowen for supporting Harken, Eliwood. Well, maybe not Marcus, because we haven't seen him yet, which, you know what that means. But Rebecca. He supports Rebecca, this, you know, 4 out of 5 unit. So we should praise Lowen for that. Bartray. 14 out of 27 and a bunch of C's. Bartray gets a higher score than his fellow fighter Dorcas due to his more balanced growths. Oh, balance is a good thing now. And potential to become speedier. However, and I'm very happy to read this, it is commonly acknowledged that this will very much rely on how good his levels are, because they don't say this, but his bases are worse than Dorcas, but they don't really like acknowledging bases too much. He has 3 base speed, Dorcas is 6, in case you didn't know, so Bartray at first needs speed procs to double anything, whereas Dorcas can double soldiers. That's the gist of it. So, I mean, I don't necessarily agree that one is that much better than the other. Dorcas and Bartray have them both in D tier, and I get where they're coming from. Bartray is like one of the few units in FE7 that's so slowly gets doubled every now and then, which is really annoying. But yeah, he can become very speedy. It happened in my Iron Man, remember? He became speedy Bartray. Got like 10 speed procs out of 10. Which turned him into a 10 units. Well, I wish it did. I actually just gave him average speed for FE7 standards, but you know what I mean, right? It takes that much to tie like Marcus at base, but let's not get into things right yet. Guy gives us Guy at 14 out of 27. This is like 8 points lower. No, this is 8 points lower. Again, I'm going to go back to this. This is 8 points lower than Lyn. Just keep that in mind. Guy is the typical Myrmidon, so his lack of strength and defense were commonly criticized. The fact that Swordmaster's innate crits dropped from 30% to 50% also made him less viable in reviewers' eyes. So again, this is not a comparison to like Japanese FE7 versus English FE7. This is a comparison to FE6. They were used to Rutger, and they got Guy. They were like, wait, they stole 15% of our crit, and I totally get that reaction. It's like when I played FE7 first and I used Oswin. Then I played FE8 and I played with Gilliam. And when I saw Gilliam, I expected Oswin, but I got Gilliam. And so they played with Rutger FE6 and then they got Guy in FE7. And instead of getting Rutger, they got Guy. I get this. I don't agree with the ranking, but I agree where they get this from. So, you know, perfectly fair. I do think Guy is better than Lyn, for instance, because Guy's stats are just all around better. He can promote before Lyn, etc., etc. All these are like good things for Guy. Also, using Guy takes you to Jeremy's version of Piltower of Darkness, but I don't expect them to get that deeply into it. But that's one drawback that I look into when I'm using Guy. Yeah, also this is how you pronounce Guy. Just getting that out there. This is how you pronounce his name. Heroes confirmed it now. But yeah, other than that, the drawbacks are fair. I personally thought Guy was amazing, but then his killing edge broke, and I realized, wait, I can trade weapons around. And that was when I first played Fire Emblem. Darts is all the way down here at 1327. Again, if you this seems inconsistent with how they view units. Before I'm reading even reading the paragraph, if they like endgame performance, if they like you know, funny big glass kind of units, if they like units that can support with Rebecca, you would think this would be way higher. The general consensus, also class by class, he's like the only berserker you get outside of Hawkeye. The general consensus was that he hits hard, but only if he actually manages to hit. Even SRPG, who gave him the highest score, acknowledged that there are many reasons not to use Dart. Furthermore, his promotion item is really valuable, so you may be more inclined to sell it, and since it's found in the desert map, you may even miss it. The opportunity to buy his promotion item doesn't come until just before the final chapter. That might be a localization thing, because you can definitely buy ocean seals in at least one version of Four-Fanged Offense. In fact, you can only buy it in one of them, not in the other. Yeah, you can miss this, but you can also miss like the assassin item later in the game. Like you only get that much later. I don't know. I find this a very like you can miss all promotion items. Like sure, it's hidden in the desert, but is that really a good argument for not? Like, is that really a great argument for docking points? I personally don't agree with this. I get it because I'm from an age where you just look up everything that really matters. So maybe this is something that someone happened. Like maybe this is something that happened to someone. They missed the promotion item. They got really salty about it, and though this is the rating they gave him as a result. I get it. I like that there's one 1A rating right here. Don't get me wrong. I don't think Dart is good. I put him at the bottom of C, and I could see him like be D tier or whatever. I just think like this is the main reason that he gets a low score, is like the low hit. And like yeah, the fact that you can sell the Ocean Seal for a lot of gold is there, and 25k is a lot of money, but you can make room for it in your budget. We didn't dock Farina all that many points for costing 20k, and she also needs 10k to promote from the Legion Whip as well, so it comes out to the same thing, but Farina is like near the top, whereas Dart is all the way down here. I don't know, I just think Dart is the kind of unit that you'd like, because again, fire support with Rebecca, one of the only units in this class type, good offensive stats. Like these are all things that they potentially like. They gave Lucius like a 20 out of 27, and he's like super frail, right? So yeah, I don't think this is a consistent way to rate him, but again, it's a compilation. Geats, 13 out of 27. We got 2 C's and then a D and a 2-star for basically 2 more D's and then a B. Reviewers mostly acknowledged that he's a decent promoted warrior with solid weapon ranks, though Armando eloquently said he's weaker than Bartray, so I didn't even bother. Damn, did they compare Bartray at base? Probably not. Did they compare Bartray? I guess they trained Bartray and then had a better Bartray than Geats, which, I mean, I guess. But he would still have B bows over Bartray, so you can give him the Brave Bow. Maybe they were busy using Rebecca for bows. Maybe that's the reason why. I don't know. I personally think Geats is hard to use because you have to train the other lords, but clearly I think all the lords are good, or at least decent, so that can't be the problem here. They don't even mention the recruitment cost here. I think they just don't like pre-promotes. That's really all I can conclude from this, is they don't like Harken, they don't like Geats, they don't like Pent enough that, you know, as much as I think they should, and so they give Geats a pretty bad rating. When I first got Geats, I thought he was like really good. Like the guy was killing enemies. But hey, 13 out of 27. Matthew has a really low rating here, 12 out of 27. 2 C's, 2 D's, and a 3-star. The general consensus is that Matthew is great at the stealing part of the thief class due to his high speed, but his strength is middling, so he really shouldn't see any combat. As a result, he isn't recommended for the assassin promotion, since he would lose the ability to steal, which is his greatest asset. So they're thinking of Matthew as a good thief, a bad assassin, which is a thing I've seen before on English rating sites too. I'm pretty sure that's like the almost exact thing I've seen like an IGN guide say about Matthew and Legault. Which is surprising because Matthew and Legault's stats are not that different, I don't think. And the assassin promotion only comes up like so late in the game. Like after you get the fail contract from Sonya, you only have like Cog of Destiny and then Hector's like little map to steal things from. And then Hector, if you're not playing Hector, you're playing Eliwood mode, which I don't think there's anything to steal there in that chapter. Maybe I'm wrong though. But there just isn't that much to steal at that point. Plus, you have Matthew and Legault, so you're not going to promote both anyway. So you're not going to miss out on the stolen items. You're just going to use Legault to get them while you promote Matthew. And I mean, I guess they don't want that because they want Legault to become the assassin. But I don't know. I think this is wrong personally. But I haven't looked into like the exact stats. I just don't think it matters that much. But again, when you're focused on endgame potential, stuff like that I guess really matters. I do think the Assassin promotion is really bad all around, just not from Matthew. It's the only promotion that doesn't give you movement. It gives like no strength. It doesn't give a weapon rank bonus for like a little bit of crit on their swords. Silencer is kind of gimmicky, so yeah. Hawkeye, 12 out of 27. They looked at Hawkeye, the man who just wrecks everything with his killer axe crit, and they said, yeah, 12 out of 27. While Hawkeye starts out with decent bases, his low growths hamper his score. Well, use the other Berserker. Use the other Berserker instead if you think this is too bad for a Berserker. 3 C's and a D and 2 stars. This is such a like Hawkeye's like B+ here for me, and only because of availability and lack of mobility for him. But they don't care about any of that. Like they really massacred my man. Big Hawkeye. How can you look at Hawkeye's base 50 HP and say, yeah, that's decent, I guess. That's fine. Wow. Hawkeye, my guy. No. Louise, 12 out of 27. D, C, D, C, and then 3 stars. So, hold up. Okay, yeah, there's one place that ranked him higher than Hawkeye. I just wanted to get that out of the way. The person with like half as much HP joining later gets gets a higher rating. Gotcha. She's only alright in the reviewers' books, given that Will and Rebecca have a better availability. Oh, we care about that now. Okay, alright. According to Kuya, she is best if using Pent as well, since they have locked A support with each other. Yeah, sure, she's a good support bot for Pent. I don't disagree with this rating personally. I have her like below Sarah in C tier, like between Sarah and Eliwood. That's fine. Louise is a little bit harder to rate. I personally don't value their availability too much, because most of their availability is spent killing things that other people have weakened for them, other than like instead of actually contributing to what I'm doing. But, you know, if you're going with that logic, then yeah, I just didn't know we're doing availability. I thought we weren't doing availability, but I guess we are. Urk, 11 out of 27. 2 Ds, 2 Cs, and a 2 star. The biggest issue with Urk for these reviewers isn't so much with Urk himself and more with his competition. Pent, Athos, and Nino are all too capable for Urk to send out amongst them. Okay, so of course I totally disagree with this. But I do get it. Like, there's a lot of other anime mages, and Urk is like the least interesting. But also none of these units are available before chapter 26. So just use Urk until then, and then if you like using him, keep using him. I've said that a lot about Urk. He's not that interesting, but he's capable. I have him ahead of Lucius. They have Urk like 9 points below Lucius, even though they're basically the same unit, except for Lucius' higher stat rank, which wasn't even mentioned here. So I don't know what they're on. Urk is fine. Y'all just, you know, SMH my head. Karel, 11 out of 27. This is another nice FE6, FE7 reference. D and not any. I'm assuming they got Harken instead or something. D, D, and 3 stars. So basically like slightly above a D. What happened in the 20 years between FE6 and FE7? The general consensus is that Karel starts off pretty weak. You're better off getting Harken, or be like Armoda and beat the chapter before turn 10, which is when Harken and Karel would have appeared. Okay, that's very funny. I can't get over the fact that this is just one person. I mean, don't disagree with his rating. I generally don't penalize him for being worse than Harken, but there's no doubt in my mind that Karel's kind of mediocre overall. I recruited Karel in my first playthrough, and I thought it was fine. Like, I killed everything with him. He's competent. What I care about is like lack of range, lack of mounts. But other than that, I think he's fine. I would give him a bit of a higher rating because he's passable. But I get why they arrived at the point where they're at. Vida gets a 9 out of 27. So a D, didn't recruit apparently. An E and a D and another 2 points. So yeah, that's a lot of Ds. Comes with good strength and alright bases, though with glaring problems in speed and resistance. Also has bad growth, so don't expect much out of her. I think Vida has good bases. I would say those bases in HP, strength, and defense are good. Her speed is good enough to double things you really care about, I want to say, especially on Hector hard mode. But, you know, if you don't try her at all, then I guess, yeah, no, really disagree with this one. But for me, the low rating would be availability. I have her in, where's she even at? Top of C, which is higher than I would expect for myself, but here we are. Vida doesn't have many chapters to contribute. It's my main problem with her. Marcus, 8 out of 27. Bunch of these and one star. This might be the only one. No, there's more 1 stars, but gosh, he's a crutch character and gets rated by like 1. Enough said. Is crutch bad? Like, is it something? It's something you can rely on, right? If everything else goes wrong, you rely on Marcus. That's a good thing, right? Like, I have him as the best unit. I thought his bases were kind of good, but I guess not. Well, shit, what can we really say at this point? If they didn't like Seth enough to give him more than a 3 out of 5, I had no hopes for Marcus, I gotta be real. But it does kind of pain me to see him below Karel and Vida and Louise and Geets and oh my god. Below Will. I mean, when is Marcus ever worse than Will? Like, okay, let's say we just don't use Marcus for the entirety of the part where he's like super overpowered. Let's say we start using Marcus in 220, and then we compare him to Will, who's been like training. I think Marcus would still be better. It's a little bit painful. Is Adora. 8 out of 27. A bunch of D's. Like, same score as Marcus. They did have E's available. They just decided that she gets the same rating as Marcus. Her low con and middling stats, only notable in speed, land her at a severely low rank. Bro, just watch Waifu Isadora. She is so much better than that. 1 rounds every generic enemy at base for like the longest time. 1 rounds every generic enemy at base for the longest time. But again, endgame performance, they care about growth. They care about availability, I guess. It's the low score. Sure. Waifu Isadora, all I'll say. Dorcas. 7 out of 27. Bunch of E's, bunch of D's. Poor Dorcas. Everyone called that a poor speed growth of 20%, and had a mediocre overall stats. This is true. My personal issue with Dorcas is that his strength is not high enough to compensate for this, so he doesn't like one-shot anything. I saw the other day there was a screenshot of someone in the Farm subreddit who trained every Lin mode character to level 20 in Lin mode, and Dorcas had like 12 or 14 strength or something, which is pathetic. It's so bad. For like, if you're gonna use speed as your dump stat, you better make sure you're good at everything else, or like really good at strength at the very least, and he's just not that. Dorcas is a very disappointing unit for sure. I think he's useful in the early game at least, but they don't really care about utility for a couple free chapters. They care about the performance overall at the end, and Dorcas's performance is not very good. So I get this. One of the few ratings I agree with again. Wallace, another very bad rating because same speed as Dorcas, right? While the reviewers gave that he's marginally better when you are not forced to promote him in Lin mode, he still has no particular advantages, resulting in his low score. Not even gonna nitpick this. Wallace is very, very bad. I have him like 3rd lowest unit in the game. Renault, 6 out of 27. An E, a D, an E, a D, and a D. His magic is pathetic for a bishop. Again, you know, just it's pathetic always. But actually, it's not that bad. It's okay. And his overall stats aren't impressive. He's mostly there for the conversations he can have. Oh, right, so the story. People like Renault's backstory a lot, so they gave him like he says, I think that's why he got a D instead of an E. I don't know if that's like, again, an editorial thing or an actual thing that SRPG wrote, but it's there, I guess. So, yeah, Renault is not very good, I do agree. I think he's a little bit better than this because he can use some high-level stabs at base, so you don't have to train anyone for it, but they clearly always do train someone for that, and so Renault ends up being superfluous, so I get it. Carla, 5 out of 27, E, and then E, just E. Basically like Electabuzz donation, it's just a bunch of E's. Her greatest achievement is giving birth to fear, Tanasu claims. She has a bad availability, bases, and growths, plus she's only found in Hector's route with some very specific recruitment requirements. Yeah, sure, agreed. Carla bad, worst unit in the game. Sure, let's roll with it. I think Will's the worst unit in the game, but that's not what Materialist shows, so I'm not even gonna emphasize that. Carla sucks. Myrmidons gets a really high rating, actually. They didn't really... I guess they put Myrmidons here because he's special. I mean, I also put Myrmidons at the top because he's special. 21 out of 27, 2 Bs, a C, and an S, and then a 5-star. As noted in his 2 highest rankings, he doesn't take up any deployment slots, and he levels up just by surviving the chapter, so he can't really be judged like other units. He's better than he was in FE6 was the common sentiment. Again, FE6 Myrmidons existing is helping him here, because I bet that people would give him a lower rating if he wasn't in FE6, he was just a unit in FE7. I saw like a multi-page debate on why Myrmidons shouldn't even be a unit. One time, I think it was on GameFAQs. I need to look that up because it was a very funny thread. People got really angry over this, and it's a funny philosophical question, like what makes a unit? And because Myrmidons is like he's a portrait, he's on the map as a unit. You can use him, you can sometimes even move him, but he's not really a unit, is he? Because he doesn't gain XP. But like, is Yoder not a unit because he doesn't gain XP? Like, these are interesting things we can have a side discussion about. But obviously, no one's going to care about Myrmidons' exact rating. Like, you deploy him and he's useful, sure, but there's no choices involved. But yeah, I just think it's funny that Myrmidons just end up being at the bottom as a bit of a surprise. But yeah, that's the rating. So I think the FE8 ones were better, honestly. Like, yeah, there were some really bad ones in there, but the consistency was a little bit better overall, I think. Like, it was very clear that they cared about one thing and one thing only, which is endgame performance, and don't really care about how they get there. So they had Ewan really high, Amelia really high, Seth kind of low, Franz was kind of middling, Navy really high. Whereas here, it feels like they rated like Heath and Rath got kind of low scores for what they are, but then Lucius was really high, and then Will was like average instead of bad or good, and then Rebecca was really high. It just felt like it was a lot more inconsistent in what they were rating actually, which again, I'm not sure what that's down to, whether that's because of the way that the ratings were added up or the way that it's just like, is it like a website's like, is this like one person rating for a whole website is the impression I'm getting. So I can't really check the sources for this, but again, if you do have connections inside the Japanese community, or you're a Japanese community member yourself, or you can read that, please do contact me, because I'm super curious about how this is nowadays, especially because I think this is all pretty old stuff that might not reflect people's opinions anymore. But I hope you enjoyed this little journey into the Japanese Fire Emblem community unit rankings, and if I find any more of this, I'll let you guys know. Hope you enjoyed. See you all around. Bye bye.